We're not hacking systems, we're hacking behaviors so you won't click. No complicated code, just tried and true brain science at play. Social engineering for good. The best defense is in your mind today.
Hello and welcome to Phishing for Answers, where the carrot beats the stick and we flip the script on the bad guys, turning humans from easy targets into the strongest line of defense.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast belong solely to the hosts and guests and don't necessarily reflect those of their employers or sponsors. We're seasoned security professionals, but this is a conversation, not a custom consultation. Need specific guidance? Reach out to Joshua Crumbaugh directly.
Get ready. Phishing for Answers starts right now.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Phishing for Answers. Today we've got Mark Butler. He is with Trace3. He's the CISO over there. And Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us how you got into cybersecurity. Would love to hear it.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate the time today. So I have an interesting story of how I got into cybersecurity. So I started doing software development many years ago on some languages that may or may not be popular these days, but there's a lot of platforms that are still around that are running a lot of the core banking systems and a lot of the financial systems, that I learned to write software on and maintain, software programs. And when I was doing software development early in my career, there was this concept of interactive programming, which was a brand new concept. And so it was a really paradigm shift in, software development to have an interaction, right, with a screen or a user or a prompt. And that was the paradigm shift of interactive programming versus just static programming. So started out in the software development world, did that for several years. And I was like, hey, I want a new challenge. I want something else to learn. So I started managing networks and then started managing teams of network engineers. And at that point in time, if you were running a network, you were running a firewall. If you were running a firewall, you were protecting the company from the outside. And not only running firewalls to protect the company, but you were also involved in investigations of, who accessed what site and who was the user and what did they do. So it was an evolution of, let's manage network devices and make sure, our connectivity's up. And it quickly evolved into, firewall management and application performance management and HR investigations. And it just was an evolution into, a cybersecurity role at that time, leading a team of, messaging engineers, firewall engineers, forensics engineers. And that was the early days of cyber in a corporate world.
Awesome. I think that's the case for a lot of us who have been in it for a while, is that we sort of stumbled into cybersecurity. Whereas these days, they have the luxury of choosing to go into cybersecurity. Of course, they have to worry about AI taking over their job. Maybe that's a good place to start. So AI is this big, massive thing, but when it comes to the human side of cybersecurity, I feel like AI is this massive threat that a lot of companies aren't doing quite enough to mitigate yet. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, on one hand, it's the most exciting times that I've ever seen, and I've been in,
agreed. It's
years. On the other hand, it's the scariest time as well. So super exciting, super scary, and for very, similar reasons that we're all dealing with of okay, I want to be more efficient at what I do. I want to be more effective at what I do. I want to be able to scale what I do from a human intellect perspective, and my opinion and my advice and my capabilities, right? As an architect, as an engineer,
Yeah.
as someone that can analyze risk, from multiple dimensions and make a determination of what's acceptable or not. And all these things are being programmatically built into, models that can be replicated. Now, the harder part of this is, yes, you can have a model. Um, you know, you can give a model a prompt and you can tell it what you want, and you know generally what it's been trained on. But since it's non-deterministic, you may not get the same result every time.
Yeah.
And so we've transitioned into this. Okay, we generally know what the answer might be, but we don't know specifically what the answer might be. And so we have to get into this validation of output, just paradigm, instead of just trying to control the front end or put guardrails on or put, filters in prompts and those type of things, which are all helpful. But at the end of the day, the non-deterministic nature of AI is going to be helpful, and it's going to be creative, and it's going to push some boundaries that you may not realize it has pushed, to either collect, chain together, aggregate, or even, build relationships that you hadn't thought about before, and portray those as something that's real.
Yeah.
So that's what we're all dealing with, from the human versus the logic versus the model versus the training.
Well, and when AIs hallucinate, they do it with a lot of confidence, and so, I mean, it seems like it really does know what it's talking about so often when maybe it doesn't. Although I know that's gotten a lot better as of late, but I still think that's so largely dependent on what model you're using. And do you understand the different models? Do you have access to the different models? And that is one of those parts where, sure, for the technophiles out there, that part's easy. But what about for the non-technophiles, the non-techno or technologically literate people? They still are using AI just like all the rest of us. And so, that I think it opens up a lot of risk as well. Not just from the perspective of, hey, it may hallucinate and they may put something out that they don't mean to, but also just in terms of uploading the wrong data to the wrong place.
Right. And I think we've evolved and moved beyond, nobody's building foundation models anymore. We're well beyond the, let me build my special foundation model that's better than your special foundation model. So that I'm glad we're actually through that phase. Right now, we can say, okay, foundation models are generally ubiquitous, but if I want to leverage one or more models, I have to really start thinking about, what do I want from an output perspective? What do I want from a content perspective? And what do I want from like an opinion perspective? And the paradigm that we're all dealing with is, how do I write very thought-provoking but intentional and specific enough prompts where I can get the output I want, and it has a little bit of creativity in it, but not too much. But also, from a data loss and a data exposure and a data, sensitive perspective, that we're not doing anything from a corporate perspective that we shouldn't be doing. And so it's really like subjectivity analysis on multiple levels at the same time. And I think most of our brains are not used to doing that to the level that we're doing it now. And so we have to start doing these mental disciplines, mental exercises. And it's a mental overhead that we're all getting used to, right? Of everything's available at our fingertips, any opinion, any fact, any perspective, Anything that's been written in any way, shape, or form is generally available. And so now it's a different way of working, because we have to build, security and guardrails and monitoring and telemetry and observability into this ecosystem that is not, a single, API gateway. It's not a single browser plugin. It's not a single, data loss prevention agent running on a file system, right? It's all these things. And it could be, Claude Code. It could be Hermes agents. It could be, a combination of things, right? From multiple providers, right? That we're interacting with. And we have to have these multiple layers of capabilities to observe, to interact, to monitor, to analyze output, and to do all this, from a kind of a multi-layer perspective. So that's the challenge that we're all dealing with is, it's not a single technology solution that's going to cover all of the facets of what we're dealing with. It's going to be a combination of technology solutions, but ultimately it's going to be a lot of, kind of micro decisions based on what's being observed, what's being prompted, what the output looks like, and then what kind of models, we're interacting with dynamically. And I think the biggest thing that we're all dealing with right now is this concept of non-human identities, or non-person entities, depending on what you want to call them. And if I have an agent acting on my behalf doing a scheduled task in Claude Code, and then it spawns another task to get something done because I told it to, but it didn't have a way to get it done, then that subtask is actually taking an action on a file or reading something or ingesting something, and so the agent action and the telemetry around the actions are going to be really important to understand, what happened under what conditions, and how do we kind of put the pieces back together, if you think of a forensics investigation type of concept.
Yeah. So, the part that brings me not as much concern around the AI writing terrible code, but it's all the development that's happening all of a sudden. You've got everyone writing code. My brother-in-law, the other day, he's non-technical. I mean, he's a major in the Army. He's in logistics, okay? Yeah. And he pulls out his phone and he's showing me this app that he's building because he had an insurance claim and the process was a nightmare. So he's writing an app to make it easier, right? And I'm just like, okay, so everyone's writing code right now. And I think there's a lot of risk to that. I think less inside of our, actual development teams where we've got proper CI/CD pipelines, but what about where we don't have the CI/CD pipelines? What kind of risk are we exposing ourselves to there?
Well, I think there's multiple layers to that question. The AI assisted developer, right, to your point, in the corporate setting is one thing. The brand new, just consumer out there, or individual person that sees an opportunity to create something, has the tools to create something, and then they're like, oh, this is the best thing ever. Well, we're creating a lot of application kind of maintenance debt for
technology debt. Yeah.
Right, of like, okay, great. I built this app. It's going to run and it's going to do X, Y, Z, and my life's better. Okay, awesome. Well, who's going to maintain it? Who's going to update the plugins? Who's going to make sure the software development kit or framework that it's leveraging under the covers that you don't know about, what if that gets changed or compromised from a supply chain perspective? There's all these other layers, right? So everybody's thinking about the functionality, which I love, which is like, hey, get creative, build what you want, help yourself. This is awesome. We also have to balance that out with, okay, who's going to maintain and update and make sure these things are reliable and secure in the future. And nobody's thinking about that unless you've actually been in a role or a function or a position where, you have to maintain uptime, and you care about throughput, and you care about scale. And typically those are, IT professionals in some way, shape, or form in a corporate environment, which has revenue streams associated with the platforms and the systems that we're using. And the consumer vibe coding that's going on is awesome, I think, from a creativity perspective, because it gives people an outlet that maybe they haven't had before. But I think we got to balance that out with, the collective maintenance of all of these apps that are getting built is going to be very, very interesting.
Oh, yeah. And not just that, but what about, yes, AI saves time, but what about the many apps that don't make the cut? That means that we're not going to be maintaining them. That means there's a lot of time invested into it potentially. But I do think that AI in general writes rather secure code. Now, just a personal anecdote, I came from a background of ethical hacking, spent a lot of time working for the federal government in application security. So I've had the opportunity to look at thousands of apps in my career. And more recently, I've had the opportunity to look at some AI developed apps. And hands down, the AI developed apps are head and shoulders above the human developed apps in terms of security. So it's not that I don't think it can write secure code. I think it can, and it'll do a great job all the time. But it's when we're, opening up infrastructure that we don't understand. It's when we're utilizing infrastructure we don't understand, not just from a potential breach perspective, but man, I've heard nightmare stories about BigQuery and products like that, and just spending, massive amounts of money in minutes,
Right.
So, I think there's just so much risk there around it. And to that, I think that it does demand a new form of security awareness education, or at least a lot of new chapters.
Right. Or at a minimum, like, even if, let's say somebody in finance is writing an app, or somebody in HR is writing an app, total legitimate need. Maybe they just could never get on the development team's, pipeline because it wasn't big enough. There's obviously a need for what they're doing. There's an automation opportunity. There's an efficiency play. But these apps should be going somewhere where there's an inventory of a collection of apps that are doing XYZ, and they're talking to these data sources, and they're putting, downstream files in these locations. And, at least you're observing in general kind of the inputs and outputs of what they're building or vibe coding. So we can at least say, okay, from a collection of apps, that have been vibe coded for our enterprise or our small business, we're going to be putting them in this central location. They have to talk to this MCP server, and, there's no other, communication boundaries outside of our approved file shares and, or, our destination reporting, locations where all of our output goes.
Yeah, I think that's where it goes back to, instead of being the Department of No, being the, what is it? What is the phrase I'm looking for? But the department that,
yes, the
Department of Yes, I guess, right? But
yes, and let me talk to you about how we can secure that.
Exactly, yes, and or whatever, right? But if the cybersecurity team sees this as being a threat, they can go and preemptively set up some hosting internally, make sure it's secure, and provide those resources to the internal departments, like the accounting or the finance team that needs this new tool. It's going to improve efficiency. I'm all about it. I just think that's an opportunity for the cybersecurity team to really go out there and win some allies throughout the business. And not only that, but align themselves with the core business objectives. And there's, that gives you so much just street cred across the organization in terms of, reputation and aura that you need, especially if it's finance. It doesn't hurt to have the finance team as a buddy.
Well, if the HR team and the finance team are talking on a separate, conversation, and they're like, "Hey, did you know I created this new app, and the security team helped me, like, get it up and running and place it in this, location that's always going to be available. And, I'm using it, and now I'm saving 3 hours a day on XYZ, reconciliation projects or whatever." Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect.
No, I think, well, and I think we also have to evangelize those experiences across the organization. So we have this win from finance. Let's go and let's talk about it. Let's send out a newsletter. Let's, whatever we can do to get that out there to the rest of the organization, because I think it's important that we celebrate all of our wins and evangelize them, especially when they're going to go a long way to helping to build that general security awareness and get people to come to you first instead of trying to go around you.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I think the adopt first mentality is going to go a long way. Even if you have to kind of architect on the fly. At least if you have a landing zone of where these things can go, and if you have some general communication patterns set up, from file sources and MCP or A2A servers, or that's going into this Kubernetes cluster, all the vibe coded agents are going into this Kubernetes cluster, and I know I can observe and monitor what's going on, from a cluster perspective, right? There's different ways to handle it, but yeah, I mean the adopt first, let's secure it together as we learn about how it operates, and then let's iterate and let's continue, right? I mean, that's exactly what we should be doing versus, blocking, stopping, or halting anything. You're going to learn more as you observe it than you probably thought you would have if you would have whiteboarded the whole thing. And you need that monitoring, observation, and real-time telemetry to put proper guardrails around what it's actually doing versus what they thought it was doing versus what they want it to do, but it doesn't do yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So slight pivot, but only slightly, because I feel like we've been talking loosely about culture for a minute here, evangelizing, not being the Department of No. But I want to just flip over to that security culture. What are some of the biggest tips that you have just for building out that culture, for making people or for getting people to think first about security, not last about the security?
Yeah, I think it's several things, but encouraging time with your stakeholders that is inside the organization, and also, for appropriate activities outside the organization. Just like you would figure out a board of directors, right? Of like, who are they? Where'd they go to school? What did they study? What are their interests? What do they like? What do they not like? You would, profile basically your board of directors to say, how can I connect with these people from a genuine interaction standpoint in the, highest degree possible. We have to do that as security teams, right? With all of our internal stakeholders across all the departments, whether it's the data team or the finance team or the legal team or the privacy team. You can't forget the personal relationship aspects of how is this person wired? What's their communication style? What are they interested in? And if it's work all the time and there's no personal, stories being told, or where did you travel to most recently? What are you getting excited about for next year? Like, there has to be some layers of personal interaction. Otherwise, it's just going to be all business, very flat interaction, and you're not going to get the support you need when you need it. Because when the incidents happen and the exposures happen and the accidental configurations happen, and on and on, you're going to have hard conversations with these same people. And regardless of who caused the incident or outage or misconfiguration, there may need to be a notification done right? There may need to be, credit monitoring offered. There may need to be, regulatory interaction. There may need to be all kinds of different things. And everybody is on the same team trying to meet the same goals from a revenue and growth and company, trajectory perspective. But with that personal interaction and that stakeholder engagement and that the time you spend getting to know the person and what they care about, like that goes a really, really long way.
I couldn't agree more. I've heard somebody say that CISO was the most social job in the C-suite. I disagree. I think CEO is the most social job, but I think CISO is a close second because you do have to, win over everybody. I mean, it is a team effort, and I've seen the CISOs that try to go with the iron fist. I mean, it doesn't work largely because in most of those companies, they may be able to roll with an iron fist for people below them, but that doesn't work real well with the C-suite that is often above you. So I think it's so critical to have those build those relationships and just make sure that the company does realize that the cybersecurity team is an ally in today's day and age, unlike decade ago when we often weren't.
Right. And I think it's that type of, we've had a genre of CISOs that were probably brought up in very technical ranks. They were very engineer focused, and they probably looked at things very logically, and there wasn't a lot of emotion and there wasn't a lot of personal interaction. And so I think that led to why do CISOs last 18 to 36 months in their roles and move on, right? Well, it's probably not a technical gap. It's probably not an experience gap. It's a relational gap of some way, shape, or form, of not being able to read the stakeholders above them, the peers of their peers, or even the board, of like, what do they care about at the end of the day? They don't expect perfection. They want the highest quality output you can give them from a security perspective, but they're all human. They all know that mistakes will happen. They want to know how fast you can recover and what you can learn and how you can pivot and how you can keep them up to date. That's the reality of it. And it's like, yes, things will happen and we will recover and we will move forward. And how do we position ourselves for the highest growth that we can, given our investment levels that are available? Yeah. And there's always that balancing act of like, I want X for a budget, but I have Y. I want, X for a team size, but I have Y. And I have a bunch of portfolio projects I need to get done, but they may get done a little bit later than I want, but I'm going to make the best of it and keep the relationships open and get the support I need when I need it, because it's just a matter of time where you need to lean on those relationships.
Yeah. And let's be honest, the only cybersecurity teams that have proper budget are the ones that just had a really major incident. So you don't want proper budget. So
Exactly. They're coming off the wave of the incident recovery and fines,
yes.
Regulatory oversight. Yes.
So jokes aside, let's talk more on the general user awareness side of things. How do you motivate people? How do you get them to want to be more engaged?
So we do surveys internally of what would you like to be able to do that you haven't been able to find a tool yet for, or you want is on your wish list. And so, some of these things are being handled with, maybe an AI solutions, team that can go, build apps or assemble apps or assemble functionality, those type of things. But we regularly ask our user base of like, what do you want to do that you've either not been able to, or what do you want to do that more efficiently, or from an automation perspective, or what do you need to get off your plate so you can spend more quality time on the higher level, strategy, go to market, the AI security architecture of the future, versus things that you're doing today that are spending a lot of time. So we try to regularly have everybody think about, how am I spending my time? How do I want to be spending my time? And what can I get off my plate from an automation or orchestration or, AI solution perspective of like, how can I make myself more efficient so I can actually spend time on higher order, opportunities. And so I think that builds a little bit of a like, oh yeah, they actually care about how I spend my time. This is good. And
Yeah, well, trust. I mean, you have to be building user trust there, and I think that comes from security.
It's a combination of security and so we have this innovation team that's always looking at new tech and researching startups and like, well, here's this startup that only does this one little thing, but it's really cool, but it's not a product yet, and it's not even a feature within a platform. But the way they approach this, nobody's approached it before, and so we're trying to bring the innovation angle in, we're trying to bring the efficiency angle in, but we're trying to build a culture of how can we help you up level and accomplish very, very large goals that you think may not even be achievable, because you have a team and a culture and an innovative environment that we're enabling you, versus just suffering under the workload of whatever you came into from a job description perspective, right? So I think that just builds a lot of like, oh, okay, I can breathe and I can look forward, and I'm not just kind of under the the drudgery of whatever my role is, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it does. There's actually this formula for behavior change that came out of Stanford's behavioral science laboratory, and it's behavior equals motivation plus ability plus prompting. And it says you have to have all three in order to truly achieve that behavior change that you're looking for, right? And I bring that up because the part that stood out to me about your approach there is right in that A for ability. When we can make things easier, in fact, when we make security the easiest option, it becomes the default option, right? And so I think the more we make it easy, the more we make it friendly, the easier it is to get people to, adopt and respond to that prompting that we've been doing with them. I think we've as an industry, we do okay on motivation, but we so often we miss ability and prompting. So I like hearing you talk about just how your goal is to make the lives of every person in the organization easier, make them more productive, and you send surveys about that. That's very unique. I'm definitely going to have to add that to the social engineering for good playbook, and we'll make sure to accredit you there. We are running a little bit low on time here. Any sort of last sort of tips or bits of advice that you want to give before we wrap up here today?
No, I would say, stay curious, always use an opportunity for learning. Nobody knows everything. This is a team sport. Ask for help. And together we'll figure it out. That's probably my summary at this point. But with that curiosity, first and foremost, I mean, we're all going to learn, we're all going to expand, and we're all going to be capable of things that are going to very probably surprise us to a huge degree going forward. But we also have to protect ourselves, in all the ways possible, as we learn together. So no, I appreciate the time today.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to see what the future holds. Maybe I'll have to have you back on here and we can just talk about predictions of how AI is just going to completely change the world.
That'd be great. Appreciate it. Thank you, Josh.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. Have another great day.